Let us pray. Holy God, you come among us when we least expect it. You invite us to wrestle with our questions and our doubts, and then you richly bless us and call us by name. Now, as we hear your word, may we too have a fresh encounter with you by the power of your Spirit. Reading a story from the 32nd chapter of the book of Genesis. The same night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked the man, "Please tell me your name." The man said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Much of God's best work takes place in total chaos, with people scared half out of their wits, writes Barbara Brown Taylor. Elijah trembling under his broom tree, pleading for God to take his life. Mary listening to an angel's ambitious plans for plunging her into scandal. Paul lying flat on his belly on the Damascus road with all his lights out. Perhaps because we know how these stories turn out, we overlook the wrestling, the stark terror of being jumped on by an unknown assailant, the collapse of the known world, the reduction of everything one has been and done down to this scorched moment of fighting for one's life. It is not the experience of God most believers seek. It's a fitting introduction to this morning's story, and actually to the stories that follow through this entire month of August. Today, it's Jacob. Next week, it's the story of Peter floundering in his attempt to walk on water. And then there comes the scrappy exchange between the Canaanite woman and Jesus. And finally, we'll look at the story of Moses and those pesky or persevering midwives. Depends on your perspective. So if you've never struggled with anything in your life, today's story and those that follow this month are not for you. If you've never had a dark night of the soul, if all of your relationships have been peaches and cream, if every one of your decisions has been easy to make, these stories are not for you. Now would be a good time to pull out that smartphone and peruse your photos or make that lunch order at Panera. If, however, you have grappled with doubt, if you've tossed and turned during a sleepless night, if you have wrestled with your faith and with God, then these stories might just be worth your attention. Today is the account of a pivotal moment in the life of Jacob, the man for whom the people and the nation of Israel are named. Jacob. In Hebrew, it comes from a verb meaning to uproot, to usurp, to take what isn't yours. Name fit Jacob well because that's who he was. He tricked his older brother Esau into giving him Esau's right to their father Isaac's property. And then Jacob tricked Isaac into bestowing on him the ancestral blessing meant for Esau. And once given, that blessing could not be taken back. Because of Isaac's disappointment in his son and Esau's desire for revenge, Jacob fled, understandably. He spent 20 years in exile, away from home, living with and working for his uncle Laban. During those years, he tended the vast flocks of Laban's sheep. He married both of Laban's daughters. He had a slew of children. He became wealthy in his own right. But Laban wasn't all that kind to Jacob. So Jacob decided to leave, taking his family and his possessions. And true to his name, he also loaded up a sizable number of Laban's sheep and some of his uncle's treasured items. Laban discovered the theft, and long story short, Jacob ran again in the only direction he could run, which was back to his homeland, back to Canaan, where, of all things, his brother Esau lived. So when we catch up to this conniving trickster, he's at the edge of the Jabbok, a small stream that drained into the River Jordan. He has prayed what turns out to be the longest prayer in the book of Genesis, asking God to protect him and admitting ever so humbly that he's not worthy of the least of all the steadfast love and all the faithfulness that God has shown to him. He's also arranged a meeting with Esau for the next morning. Jacob hopes to atone for his wrongdoing and make peace with his brother. But he doesn't know if Esau is at that point and ready to do that. Esau may end up killing Jacob on the spot. Jacob sends out scouts who return with the news that Esau is near and that he has 400 armed soldiers with him. So Jacob gathers all his possessions, all his servants and animals, all his sheep, both stolen and earned, and even his wives and children, and sends them on ahead across the Jabbok and into Esau's hands. They're a gift, he tells his brother, hoping somehow to trade his way out of trouble. That leaves Jacob all by himself for the remainder of the night. What happens next is best described by Frederick Buechner. Out of the deep of the night, a stranger leaps. He hurls himself at Jacob, and they fall to the ground, their bodies lashing through the darkness. It's terrible enough not to see the attacker's face, and his strength is more terrible still, the strength of more than a man. All the night through, they struggle in silence until just before morning, when it looks as though a miracle might happen. Jacob is winning. The stranger cries out to be set free before the sun rises. Then, suddenly, all is reversed. The stranger merely touches the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and in a moment, Jacob is lying there, crippled. And the sense we have, which Jacob must have had, that the whole battle was, from the beginning, fated to end this way. That the stranger had simply held back until now, letting Jacob exert all his strength and almost win, so that when he was defeated, he would know that he was truly defeated. So that he would know that not all the shrewdness and will and brute force that he could muster were enough to get this. Jacob will not release his grip. Only now it's a grip not of violence, but of need, like the grip of a drowning man. Who is this stranger? The Hebrew language doesn't make it clear. It uses the word ish, which means man in Hebrew, but the scholars aren't in consensus about that. Some contend it's an angel. Others say it's one of Jacob's inner demons or simply a dream. Jacob himself says it is God who pounces on him. Whoever the stranger is, Jacob refuses to release him until the stranger blesses him. And the stranger obliges. The blessing Jacob is given is a new name, the name Israel. And Israel derives from a Hebrew verb that means to struggle, persevere. Jacob is now Israel, the one who refuses to yield, even when it's God who insists on being released. It's as though God were saying, I bless your struggle and your dogged determination. So let's linger for a moment with Jacob's conclusion that the stranger who attacks him is none other than God. If that's so, then there's another interesting way to understand Jacob's new name of Israel. Yes, the name can refer to Jacob's struggles, but according to one biblical scholar, Israel can also mean God struggles. God perseveres. God persists. The name can just as surely refer to God's grip on Jacob as Jacob's grip on God as dogged and determined as Jacob is, no less dogged and persistent is the God who from now on will be known as the God of Israel. I find that intriguing and in some ways a little unnerving. I mean, I think more than a few of us liken God to a genie, being that grants you 3 wishes, which you may redeem at any time. Your wish is the genie's command. The genie stays inside the lamp until needed. That's a nice, sedate, contained, and domesticated God. No one in his or her right mind asks to be attacked or frightened or wounded, says one preacher, and yet that's how it comes sometimes, the presence and blessing. Sometimes it comes in the middle of the night, in the desperate wrestling that's the answer to all our prayers. Who would have thought it? Jacob limps away from the wrestling match, a limp that will forever remind him of that night. I have seen the face of God and lived, he says. And he goes on to meet his brother Esau, who embraces him and welcomes him home. The dogged determination of God, the God who comes not just as comforter, but as confronter, the God who goes to the mat for us and with us. We've seen that side of God in the person of Jesus Christ, the one who grabbed hold of the likes of Peter, the one who went toe-to-toe with Herod and more like him. That's who jumps us in the middle of the night, who wrestles with us in the midst of our struggles and our conniving. That's the one who comes in relentless grace. It's a grace that never loses its grip, never gives up or gives in, never abandons us. It's the same one who invites us to this table of grace, the one who tangled with death itself and won a unanimous decision. So we have a new table this morning, a new communion table. It's actually a new old table or an old new table, however you want to put it. It's the same top from the former table. It looks smaller somehow, but it's the same top. The legs are crafted from wood from pews sat in this sanctuary, and the ironwork underneath it picks up the design of the ironwork in the ceiling, down to the twists in the rod, if you look closely. So Will Lavender designed this table. Bradley Bell did the carpentry. Joe Babb fashioned the ironwork, and now Will and Camille are giving this table to First Presbyterian Church. If Bradley were here, he would tell you that he wrestled with this pew wood. Oak begins as a hardwood, and as it ages, it gets even harder. Bradley had to use special techniques to attach those pieces together, using things like pre-drilling and waxing the nails. Otherwise, those nails will start in as straight, and then they'll bounce back, or they'll turn 90 degrees, and the wood will split. And if you come up and you look closely, you'll see places that are filled. Those places aren't mistakes from what Bradley did. Those places are from where those pieces were attached before as pews. Those filled places serve as reminders to me of all those saints who sat on those pews. Saints who no doubt had their own struggles through life, who wrestled with God and God with them. Those who know the depth of the relentless grace of God and have received God's blessing. It isn't every day that a new table dons a sanctuary that isn't new itself. My prediction is that this table will outlive all of us. Generations to come will gather around it to share the feast prepared by our Lord. This indeed is the table of grace for us. It is in this sanctuary, but it's not our table. This is the Lord's table.